The Denver Broncos are in danger of losing defensive backs coach Christian Parker potentially to the Green Bay Packers, where they originally got him from. We'll talk about the impact of that if that comes to fruition here for the Broncos. Plus, Super Bowl 58 is set. We share our thoughts, analysis, and more in today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Broncos Country's hopes are riding on the San Francisco 49ers in 2 weeks' time for Super Bowl 58 as unfortunately the Kansas City Chiefs have made it to the big dance once again. Welcome into a brand new episode of Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos Country for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day every single day. We appreciate you so much, whether you watch us on YouTube or listen wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe and follow so you never miss out on what's going on with your favorite team every single day, all year long, including throughout the entire offseason, because for the true fan, there is never an offseason. I'm Cody Roark. I cover the Broncos as a reporter for Mile High Sports, joined alongside by Sayre, Bedinger, site expert, predominantly orange.com. AFC, NFC Championship weekend in the books here, Sayre. We know who's going to be playing in Super Bowl 58 in Las Vegas in just 2 weeks' time. Unfortunately, the Broncos are not going to be in that, but their biggest rival that we talk about almost every single season will be back in the big dance here once again. We'll obviously break that down, but really I think we got to start off with some Broncos news to kick off today's episode of the show, because something could happen maybe as soon as Monday or Tuesday if some of the rumors are true. Broncos defensive backs coach Christian Parker interviewed on Friday for the Green Bay Packers defensive coordinator job with Matt LaFleur, and obviously Matt LaFleur knows Christian Parker. He obviously brought him on part of his staff as a defensive quality control coach back in 2020 before Vic Fangio and Ed Donatello decided to grab him and bring him over to Denver to coach defensive backs, where he has done a tremendous job. And we've had a lot of Packers fans, Sayre, on our YouTube comments. We did a show after he interviewed for the Patriots defensive coordinator job, which he did not get that job. And a lot of Packers fans are like, hey, we hope we get him after watching the show. So, a similar situation here this week as, there are some sparks maybe flying that Christian Parker could be heading elsewhere.
Very well, it could be maybe a little full circle moment for Christian Parker, right? Obviously, he was in Green Bay when a number of the players that are currently in that defensive backfield were either drafted or kind of were in their formative years. And so I think it makes sense, Cody. I mean, the familiarity with Matt LaFleur, of course, if you're a Packers fan, I mean, you've got to be excited about the potential. I think Packers fans were just excited to move on from Joe Barry and get fresh blood in there, whether that was a veteran defensive play caller, whether it's somebody like Christian Parker, who's largely untested. But I think if the Packers fans are wondering, hey, what are you going to be getting? I think it's somebody who's obviously worked for some really good coaches. Vic Fangio is one of the best defensive coaches in the NFL, and for him to recognize a talent like that is a big deal. And like you said, he's done a really good job developing these defensive backs, and we've highlighted that a number of different times. I mean, you can't necessarily say, well, Christian Parker is the reason why Pat Surtain is so great, but I mean, he's definitely been instrumental in his growth and development as a young player. So I think there's some give and take there. And even with guys like Justin Simmons, getting him to the next level, but it really makes you look at the unheralded players, right? The guys like PJ Locke, Jaquan McMillan, younger players, getting Damari Mathis ready as a rookie, especially having him see a bounce back after that first game where he had 4 pass interference penalties, just seeing all these different things at the defensive backfield, the way these guys have played and how well they've played since Christian Parker has been there. It would get me excited, Cody, if I was a Packers fan, just thinking about the possibility of him coming in, working with a unit that had a lot of injuries last year for the Packers, and players like, Jair Alexander got star power out there, got a former first rounder, Eric Stokes. You'd love to see that unit take it to the next level and really elevate that side of the ball. Maybe Christian Parker is the guy to get the job done.
And there's some building anticipation that could be the case. There were a couple of reports out there. Like I said, it's hard to tell these days on Twitter who's reputable, who's not, because you could buy the blue check. I don't know, but we saw several reports out there where they said an offer was made to Christian Parker. I haven't seen that put out there by Ian Rappaport or Tom Pelissero. So it's hard to believe what you see on the internet these days. So I mean, maybe there is something to it. I mean, I just know this as well. Like, he is a rising name in the coaching circle. He's been on Tom Pelissero, Peter Schrager over the last couple of years every year, and you've probably made mention of this before, they put out a list every year of coaches to watch, like top young coaches to watch in the upcoming cycles. Christian Parker's name has been thrown out there. And look, not only has Christian Parker been a guy whose name is thrown out as, hey, a potential defensive coordinator, there's a lot of belief around the NFL that he could be a future head coach one day. And I can tell you this, seeing firsthand how he works with players, how he understands how these guys best learn, and how he also relies on the veteran guys to help really carry over that. Like for the young rookies, it was a seamless transition for guys to come in not knowing what to expect at the NFL level, hearing it from a coach, and then also getting that from guys like Justin Simmons and Patrick Surtain and Kareem Jackson and those vets in that room. You made a point about Damari Mathis as a rookie. I mean, just think about the circumstances and the stakes that, he had to face last year. He had to step up in the game for PS2 when PS2 had that shoulder injury against the Texans, against Brandon Cooks, who's one of the fastest dudes in the NFL and held his own in the goal line in the red zone. And then when Ronald Darby tore his ACL, he stepped in and had to make plays. And that's where you just see like, hey, like Christian Parker with these guys and these DBs, and we saw it with Jaquan McMillan, even if they're not playing, they're always staying ready, and he's always on them about like, hey, make sure you stay ready, like lock in on this, like make sure you know the assignments because you never know what can happen. And I think that's a sign of a good coach. I think it'd be easy, Sayre, to sometimes if you're a good coach and I got Ronald Darby, which, Darby was a pretty good player for the Broncos there before he got hurt. And then you have Patrick Surtain, the mindset could be right there. Like, well, I don't necessarily have to worry. I got these two really good guys, and we got K'Wan Williams. I don't have to worry about anything. Like these guys are just going to go out there and play. But when you lose those guys, I think it's a sign of great coaching when you can have a young guy with not a lot of experience step in and play a big role. Not only is that good preparation by the player, but that's also a great sign of a coach who knows how to keep his guys prepared, which in today's NFL, it's so important. But it's different, though, when you're coaching a position versus having to run an entire defense. And I think I'd be very curious to see how he manages calling a defense for the first time at the NFL level. I mean, his first start in the NFL was in Green Bay, right? So being able to go back to the roots in which he came into the league, get that valuable experience, and it could be a fast track. And look, with Green Bay and the guys that they have defensively, I know you've covered a lot of the Packers this year on your NFL side of things in terms of writing. That might be a great situation for a guy like Christian Parker to step into. But also, there are high expectations there in Green Bay, as you've probably seen in the comments on some of the articles that you've written about the Packers this season. So we'll continue to monitor this situation here for the Broncos. And look, obviously, if they lose Christian Parker, it would be a huge blow to Denver's coaching staff. I would be very curious to see who Sean Payton goes out there and looks to pursue. Would Bill Belichick be interested in coming and coaching DBs? Or, heck, better yet, he retired from the college football game. Would Nick Saban come out and maybe coach Denver's defensive backs and reunite Coach Patrick Surtain? I'm joking. That's not going to happen. But it would be a nice little theory to throw out there here. So let us know your thoughts, Broncos country. If CP departs the Broncos, what is your level of concern of that maybe impacting the performance of the secondary going forward? Let us know if you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening wherever you get your podcast. Get involved in the conversation on social media at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger, at Locked On Broncos. But we know one thing over the weekend. We found out Super Bowl 58 is set. The Kansas City Chiefs will take on the San Francisco 49ers in a rematch from 4 years ago. We'll break it down how it happened, how these matchups came to be for Super Bowl Sunday. We'll break that down here on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos. This episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there at Prize Picks, and Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports done the right way. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They are the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling against thousands of other players, including the pros and the sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and then you watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is the most fun that I've had, winning up to 25 times my money this football season. You just select 2 or more players. You pick more or less on their projected stats, and then you place your entry. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Scholes? You can now find the community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each and every single week. So make sure you check it out. They have quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types. That's what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. So check it out. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Once again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100.
It wasn't exactly the championship round that Denver Broncos fans had envisioned going into the weekend. The Kansas City Chiefs now going to the Super Bowl for the I saw him counting on the sideline there. 4th time in Patrick Mahomes' career. The dynasty that has followed up the New England Patriots dynasty is in full effect at this point, but they got to get past the San Francisco 49ers. Now we're going to break down championship weekend, what we saw in these games between the Chiefs and Ravens, as well as the 49ers and Detroit Lions. But want to say thank you and give a shout out to all of you everyday listeners of Locked On Broncos out there. And like Cody said earlier, hey, if you're from another team's fan base and joining us, welcome into the show. We appreciate every single one of you for making us part of your day every single day right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, as well as those of you who watch on YouTube. We appreciate all of you. Cody, let's start off with the Kansas City Chiefs, the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens, Cody, I don't know. They laid an egg. This was not a not a good situation for the Baltimore Ravens. They did not look like they did the previous week when we saw them kind of just running all over the place and doing whatever they wanted to offensively. Kansas City's defense is legit, and they shut the Ravens down all afternoon.
Yeah, and look, this had all the makings at the very beginning to be an instant classic, right? It got 7-7 at one point. Like, okay, hey, this is going to be a great game between Lamar and Patrick Mahomes, and you're seeing these teams make big play after big play. Chiefs go up 14-7, and then from that point forward, the Ravens really just, I don't know what happened. I don't know if the moment got too big for them, but they started making a lot of boneheaded mistakes. We talk about penalties being an issue, their inability to convert on 3rd down. I felt like they didn't run the football enough. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I think Gus Edwards had 3 total carries in the game, which is like, what formula is that? And it wasn't like the game was ever really out of reach for Baltimore. Now, at times late in that second half, I felt like, okay, well, hey, it's 17 at this point to 7. It feels like, even though it's a 10-point game, it feels like it's just away from them. It's entirely gone because they just couldn't generate momentum. They turned the football over. And it just brings me to this thing, Sarah. I don't like that we have to talk about this, but I think it's important because you see it so common on social media. You see it everywhere, like right now. Folks, there is no such thing as a conspiracy theory in the National Football League. The National Football League is not rigged. The National Football League is not scripted. Unfortunately, look, we can agree at times, and it was consistently throughout the entire playoffs and even throughout the season. Officiating has been bad. And yeah, there were maybe some times the refs didn't throw a flag on Kansas City for what could have been pass interference or defensive holding, maybe when there should have been a call. That's not the reason that the Baltimore Ravens lost. The Baltimore Ravens couldn't make plays happen. And when you have a turnover where you fumble the ball at the 1-yard line and it goes out of the back of the end zone and it gets recovered by the Chiefs defense and it ends up being a touchback, what are you going to do in that situation? That hurts you. That costs you points there. The Zay Flowers taunting penalty backed them up. That hurt them in that same regard. That was a rough drive for Zay. He'll bounce back. He's a talented young player. But then you also look at Lamar throwing an interception into triple coverage. Like, those opportunities right there are what hurt the Baltimore Ravens in this game. And the Chiefs, they capitalized. And Patrick Mahomes, they came out on fire, and he was efficient. He was effective. And they just found a way to grind it out, even though they still let Baltimore hang around a little bit in this game. So while Kansas City was really good in that regard, the Ravens had every opportunity to try to come back and win this game, but they just couldn't capitalize. And that's a testament to that Chiefs defense, which is playing really good. And right now, like I even said this, you mentioned 4 Super Bowl appearances in 5 years for the Kansas City Chiefs. That is that dynasty like feel. Like, this is the team that, we always hated when we were younger, when it was like the New England Patriots and Tom Brady. We hated them, right? And Broncos country hated them. That's where things are at now with the Chiefs. And obviously there's a lot of bad blood, no pun intended there, by the way, from Broncos country to Chiefs kingdom. But that's just going to set up another matchup. And I think it just raises the stakes that, hey, now you have a potential, once again, the defending Super Bowl champion last year in your division. They have a chance to repeat back-to-back here this year, which then puts more pressure on the Broncos organization. So just a disappointing performance from Lamar Jackson, who obviously has been and is, in my opinion, still the MVP candidate. Bad game. Unfortunately, that's just the way that it goes. And hey, they're going to bounce back, and Denver's going to have to play them next year too. So there's still going to be a challenge, but just an overall disappointing, outcome, I think, for everybody in Broncos country that wanted the Ravens to win. Kansas City's going to Vegas, and they're going to be taking on the San Francisco 49ers, who, Sayre, I mean, in the first half, we thought it was over. We thought, like, oh my gosh, like all the pressure on Kyle Shanahan, the 49ers. And we had talked about this in our preview episode last week. Well, they found a way to rally back from a tremendous deficit in that second half, and they're going to be going to the Super Bowl.
They really did. I mean, Deebo Samuel playing such a crucial role. I don't know why guys choose. I saw some trash talk between he and CJ Gardner Johnson. I don't know if that was old news or what, but man,
They don't like each other.
they don't like each other, right? And I don't understand why you choose now of all times to start talking trash about guys who could beat you in a game. And Deebo Samuel was out there. We talked about in the lead up to the game, like, we don't know, is he going to play? Is he too hurt to make a big enough difference? He was the difference maker in this game for me, Cody, in terms of just the way that they came back against Detroit, where it looked in the first half like Detroit's running the ball well. They're spreading the ball around in the passing game. They got off to a huge lead. And the 49ers, you don't necessarily peg them as a team that's with Brock Purdy. Maybe I just don't have enough respect for Brock Purdy personally at this point. I mean, I respect the guy for what he does, but like in my brain, watching a team go down 24 to whatever it was, I'm
7.
not thinking, 24-7. I'm not sitting there thinking like, oh yeah, Brock Purdy's got this. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at with him, which maybe I should be singing a different tune when it comes to this guy, because Brock Purdy was out there making big time plays. I mean, a lot of people knock this guy for whatever reason, 7th round pick, and the fact that, he was not even really supposed to play last year as a rookie and all these different things. It's like our minds can't wrap around the fact that this guy is playing as well as he is. And he looks like he was a 1st round pick last year. He's making plays with his legs. He's making that the throw that he made to Juwan Jennings. I know you 10 times out of 10, you tell guys, hey, never make that throw. But man, that's a playmaker. If Mahomes makes that play, the entire NFL world is going absolutely bonkers. So I think Brock Purdy deserves a ton of credit. And I do feel like the 49ers, Cody, in the second half of that game, they kind of like reclaimed their mojo, right? It felt like it was gone in the first couple weeks of the playoffs there, and I feel like they've got it back. I feel like they've got an opportunity to really go in against Kansas City. Of course, we want the Chiefs to we don't want them to win this Super Bowl, right? But
No.
it's really a matter of, can the 49ers take down a Chiefs team that now looks like it's finally hit its stride. So this is going to be fascinating. 2 teams with 2 great coaches that have a long time now to game plan. I can't wait to see this matchup, honestly.
Well, and you look at it as well, just an epic collapse by the Detroit Lions in that second half. I mean, you go up 24-7, like you have momentum. It's great. But then all of a sudden you lose the momentum. You have a turnover, the 49ers score, and all of a sudden it's 24-24. They kick a field goal and then they get the ball back. Then they go down and they score a touchdown. And I think the downside was we saw Dan Campbell choose to go for it on 4th down versus kicking a field goal, which would have tied the game up at 27 apiece. You don't do it. You go for it on 4th and 3. Jared Goff rolls out and tries to throw on the run, which is not an ideal scenario. You don't want Jared Goff throwing on the run. Incomplete. They go down, they score a touchdown, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, that's it. And then just costly, decision to run the football, and then you're forced to blow a timeout, and then it's like, now you have to rely on getting an onside kick. It's just crazy to see how it changes, Sayre, because like in that first half, I remember seeing it on Twitter. I don't know what you saw, but I saw things saying, wow, this is why Kyle Shanahan is overrated. And like everyone's, like Broncos country is like, dang, we want Kyle Shanahan. But then you see people saying like, oh, I'm so glad you don't have him. Football is such an intricate sport to where based on how things are going, like you see the narratives change a little bit. And I think that's just an emotional reaction to a lot of the things. But a lot of people are even like coming out saying that they should fire Dan Campbell of the Detroit Lions. Like, come on, like Dan Campbell, what he's done is impressive. I don't think you fire him because of this. Like, if you get it, nobody complains about it, right? If you get that 4th down conversion, everyone's like, hey, he's a genius. Oh, but you didn't get it. It's like, oh, what is he doing? It's just crazy to see the narratives and the talking points that come out of like the emotional reaction of football. And it's crazy. I think it leads to a lot of the hot take stuff that we see on some of the national shows, which I refuse to watch because it's crazy. It's just a bunch of people trying to yell over each other with the loudest voices. But unfortunate for Broncos country this week. And I think everybody was kind of hoping for, if you're a Broncos fan, you were hoping for a Ravens versus Lions Super Bowl. Unfortunately, that's not going to be the case. You're going to get the 49ers and the Chiefs in a rematch. And so in terms of that rematch, there are some storylines that we'll have our eyes on from a Broncos country perspective. We'll share our thoughts on Super Bowl 58 coming up here in today's episode, Locked On Broncos. This show is brought to you by our sponsor, BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest, big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you, and it's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased on your life. So today I want to say how I really feel about something, and you might even be thinking about the same thing this week. Life can be frustrating. There can be things that come up unexpectedly that challenge you, that put you in a place, and sometimes we don't have the answer for that, and it's perfectly okay to not have the answer, but it is important to find the tools that can help you overcome some of the tough situations and thinking patterns that you may develop. And that's where therapy comes in as handy. I've used BetterHelp before in the past. And the thing I love about BetterHelp, it was super easy for me to sign up. I just filled out a questionnaire and a form. I submitted it. I got matched to a therapist within minutes, a licensed therapist. And I vibe really well with my therapist. I did about 3 months with BetterHelp, and I found a lot of tools and resources that have helped me that I still apply to my day-to-day life here today. So make sure you check that out. Therapy can be different for everyone, and most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports team. And it's important to get those things off your chest every once in a while. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. So visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/lockedon. BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. As we jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, we'll share some of our Broncos Country angles on Super Bowl 58 here in 2 weeks as AFC West Division rival Kansas City Chiefs will take on the San Francisco 49ers. Real quick, we just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody in Broncos Country for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day every single day. Just a reminder, Locked On Broncos, we're available for you every single day, all year long, throughout the entire offseason, because there's so much going on with this team. There's so many different talking points to break down, and we're going to obviously showcase that to you here on the show in the coming days and weeks. You're going to get specific position reviews from 2023 and forecasts for the 2024 season ahead, every position on offense and defense. So prepare yourself. That is coming your way here shortly. Sayre, Super Bowl 58, Chiefs, 49ers, Allegiant Stadium. I mean, it's just kind of a little bit of a dirty vibe to it just because you have AFC West Division rival Kansas City playing in Las Vegas where the Las Vegas Raiders play. My biggest hope is that hopefully the 49ers win. And on top of that, hopefully the field condition this year for the Super Bowl is much better than it was last year and much better than what we saw in Week 18 when the Broncos played the Raiders on that same surface.
Yes, you need to have that, and of course, for two teams that they run the track meet offensively, I think they're gonna absolutely be double, triple checking to make sure the field conditions are what they need to be. But 100%, we get a Super Bowl rematch here. I believe the last time these two teams played in the Super Bowl, Cody, the Jimmy Garoppolo led 49ers probably should have beat the Kansas City Chiefs and just couldn't finish the job late. It was
Emmanuel
the first
Sanders.
Yes, Emmanuel. Yeah, they almost did it. They almost did it. But that ended up being Mahomes' first Super Bowl, if I remember correctly. Feels like forever ago at this point. But man, it's crucial for the legacy of Kyle Shanahan at this point. I think one of the best coaches in, I don't know, however many of the last, 15 or so years that you want to say in the NFL. I mean, Kyle Shanahan is so influential to the way teams play offense in the NFL. Obviously Mike Shanahan was a pioneer of that and built up this whole staff, in Washington that everybody loves to throw the memes on Twitter and everything nowadays. But Kyle Shanahan is really that guy that I think he's so great of a coach. He's such a great offensive mastermind. He knows how to utilize personnel, player development off the charts. Can you get that Super Bowl win under your belt as a head coach, which, I mean, he had a great shot as an offensive coordinator in Atlanta. I mean, they had some really good teams in Houston when he was there with Gary Kubiak. He's had some really good 49ers teams, but they've never been able to get the job done. They've collapsed in big moments, and you almost thought that was going to happen against Green Bay a couple weeks ago. You see them get off to a huge deficit against Detroit, and you're like, oh my gosh, is this happening to Kyle Shanahan's team again? But now to go back to the Super Bowl against Mahomes with maybe the best team that he has had in San Francisco, which is saying something. Really good teams. I like what Kyle Shanahan does, Cody. I always have. I know many in Broncos country have. I want to see him get that first Super Bowl win as a head coach.
Yeah, well, and hey, I can confirm exactly what you said. Earlier this season, like while the Broncos were playing, I think this was at the midway point of the year, I bumped into Mike Shanahan and I talked to him for about 5 or 10 minutes. And he had told me, he said, Kyle thinks that this is the best team that he's ever had. And now you see that they're in a position to where they can compete. Look, they gave up a lot of yards on the ground in that first half against the Lions, which was uncharacteristic of that 49ers defense there. But man, did they find a way to buckle down in the second half against Detroit? You look at obviously the Chiefs offense, a lot of their production, like they've had a lot of struggles this year, but so far in the postseason, they've kind of flipped the switch. And Travis Kelce is playing on another level, which kind of brings me to this, point here. Like, could Broncos country at this point, like something to watch for here after Super Bowl 58? There's been rumblings, right? And look, the rumblings are rumblings. Not sure how true or how legitimate some of them are, but there have been rumblings that after, like, if the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, Travis Kelce may retire, Andy Reid may retire. Would that be like a saving grace? Like, if Broncos country like knew, okay, like for certainty, if Kansas City wins and that happens with those two, would Broncos country actually be okay with Kansas City winning a Super Bowl? I think that's a very fair question to throw out here. But also at the same time, if you're a Broncos fan, you don't want the Chiefs to win anything. So it's kind of like a catch-22. And there's still a chance that they could retire even if they lose. But I think that the storyline here is that the Broncos, once again, when we talk about the fan base in general, even though the Denver's not playing in this game, they're going to have to rely on a McCaffrey and a Shanahan here once again to have that good feeling saying, hey, you know what? The team that you wanted to win won. And that's going to make this matchup a little bit more intriguing here. And I imagine it's going to be a very, very festive event here, Super Bowl week, Radio Row. I'm supposed to be out there. So we'll see what the festivities bring. But, man, this is a big game. This is a really big game here. No Jimmy Garoppolo here. And I think you can make the argument, okay, well, if you're comparing Jimmy G to Brock Purdy, as you mentioned, when Brock Purdy so far in the postseason, I will give him credit to this regard. When they've needed him to make big plays, he has made big plays. You mentioned that one throw to Jawan Jennings. I'll even go to the Kyle Juszczyk sideline throw, toe tap, where he just kind of flung it before getting tackled. And then obviously Debo playing big ball there. And then Christian McCaffrey healthy. These guys are going to have a week, almost 2 weeks to get to that full game where I think both teams are going to be fully healthy. This should be an entertaining game, regardless of how you feel about either of them.
Yeah, because defensively, Kansas City, we've touched on this in previous episodes as well. Obviously, we've broken down Chiefs games multiple times this season, including their playoff games now. I mean, from the front to the back, George Karlaftis, Chris Jones, obviously in the secondary, L'Jarius Sneed, Trent McDuffie. These guys play, they're so sound, they're so disciplined. They make plays on the ball. They know when to, Steve Spagnuolo knows when to send blitzes, and he's effective at scheming against these offenses. I haven't seen much of a weakness in Kansas City's defense throughout the season. Even when they've been struggling, they've had their defense is keeping them in games. And Broncos fans know, I mean, hey, your offense just needs to do enough. And I think that's where people have really been. I know the Chiefs have become professionals at finding somebody to be mad at, which is a great trait, if it motivates you enough to win. But they're finding all these voices that are, calling them underrated or, selling them short or whatever it may be. And it's like, come on, everybody knows the Chiefs, what they bring to the table, especially this time of year. Anybody who's got some sense anyway, nobody actually thought the Chiefs were bad. Of course, we were all enjoying them, struggling in the regular season with 6 losses. We're like, man, this is great to see. Maybe there is, some weakness in the armor there. But they've turned it on in the playoffs because they're mad at some people right now. They went on the road. Nobody believes we can go on the road and win. It's like, dude, come on, find something real to be mad at. But it's working for them. So I think that that's what scares me about this Chiefs team is that they can find just about anything to be mad at. And Patrick Mahomes, he's just on another level, man. I mean, he'll make enough plays to win any game. Doesn't matter if it's 17-10, doesn't matter if it's 34-31, doesn't matter. Whatever it is, if he can have the ball last, the Chiefs are probably going to win the game.
Yeah, it's a scary dynamic. And look, Denver's going to have to find a way to figure out how to compete inside the division. And obviously, Denver got their first win against Kansas City in forever this past year. Can they build on that? It's going to be tough, more momentum for Kansas City if they do win the Super Bowl. So everybody in Broncos country is and should be rooting for the San Francisco 49ers at Super Bowl 58. But with that said, Broncos country, we appreciate you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Locked On Broncos. Tomorrow's episode of the show for you every day is the Senior Bowl is coming up, and the Broncos, they have their eyes on a lot of the players there, including a potential franchise quarterback. We'll break it all down on tomorrow's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.